welcome back to Car Stories with Sung Kang.
And Emelia Hartford.
Hey, Emelia, I have to ask you a question.
Yes.
Before we get to our next guest. So my wife and I, we got in a pretty big argument lately.
Okay.
And I want to hear another female's perspective on this. So I was traveling for a few months, right?
Mm-hmm.
And during the travels, I ran out of underwear.
Okay.
And then I was living out of a hotel.
Okay.
And I don't know if you've ever done laundry at a hotel. It's like highway robbery, what they charge you for.
It's insane.
Right?
Absurd prices. I
Right.
usually try to find like a local laundromat.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I just didn't have the time to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we're in locations where I couldn't do that. So
Right.
I did laundry once. And then, but I have a problem paying that kind of money to
It's like
wash.
$5 for a pair of underwear. Or something
Sometimes
like that.
more.
Yeah.
So I just stopped wearing underwear. And my wife thinks it's disgusting. But then I tell her, I go, well, it's like I stopped wearing underwear, but I do wash the pants. And then I thought about it. It's like, why does a guy, I'm just going to speak for men. It's like, why do I need underwear? What is the point of it? So is that disgusting? She's like, that's gross. That's disgusting. That's like, I can't believe you would do something like that. I'm like, well, it's not like, why do I need that? It's such a waste of money at the end of the day.
I don't know. I'm sitting here as you're telling that story. I'm thinking do guys even really need underwear?
Exactly, right.
What's the purpose of it?
What are boxers? They're like shorts. They're like shorts at the end of the day, right? So what do I need underwear for?
Unless you're wearing sheer pants. This is going to get gross, but I know some guys just pull their boxers and don't wipe.
Oh yeah, well, look.
And all the guys are like, yeah.
Well, you know guys that do that. I don't do that. I'm not one of those guys. I have a lot of pride in personal hygiene, so
Isn't it like a thing? Maybe I'm wrong. Isn't it like a thing when guys shake it and that's their?
So do you think?
Oh God.
I mean, if you have that habit, sure. I guess I understand the purpose of underwear, but otherwise, would you get in an argument with your future husband or significant other because he's not wearing underwear and he's clean? I don't have body odor and stuff like that. I'm pretty sanitary. So I go, what do I need this for?
An argument? No. I want to be like, yeah, why wouldn't you wear underwear? But as we're having this conversation, I'm struggling to see the point of it.
That's what I mean, right? Because I was like, explain to me why I need underwear. It's like, well, that's gross. And I go, that's the reason why I need underwear, because it's gross. Who invented this thing called underwear? Why do I even need it? Right? It's restrictive.
Especially if it's just boxers and not something to support.
Yeah. Well, I started doing a lot of running, right? Like mid-distance running. I don't wear underwear.
Really?
Yeah, because it's constrictive. You're all blushing. Why are you blushing?
Because
this is a serious
weird
question.
visuals thinking of the anatomy of well, if you're running, wouldn't you want something to support it? Because I know as a woman, I like to wear sports bra because I don't need something bouncing around. So I'm thinking.
Yeah, I guess, but then I guess, but I don't think I need that.
Okay.
Yeah, because I'm trying to prove her point. I'm like, less laundry.
Yeah.
So it's you actually and then.
But then you're known as the guy who doesn't wear underwear.
But you don't know who's gonna see.
Yeah.
No one knows.
Except anyone listening to this podcast.
Yeah. Well, I have nothing to hide. But seriously.
Yeah.
Right? Come on, listeners. Everyone. Think about it. It's
I don't know. You're right. I'm struggling to see the point of it.
I understand why a woman, a female, would need underwear. As if she's wearing a skirt or a dress. You don't want. It's concealing things, right? But.
Well, it also keeps the area clean from
what?
Bacteria
all right. But then what does
that.
a dude need that for, right? It's I'm wearing pants 99% of the time, right?
As long as you trust your farts, I guess.
Well, what is that? It's not like fart's going to spray things and you're wearing pants. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
All right. So are you pro underwear or
I'm going to say I'm pro underwear, but I agree that,
You agree with my argument that it's unnecessary depending on your level of hygiene, right? Yeah. See?
As long as you wash your clothes, I guess, and
Yeah, you wash, and I wash
you
all
don't
my
want
clothes.
it to smell.
Look, there's no issues with that, right? So, okay, good. All right.
Glad we got that out of the way.
Okay, so next, on to our next guest.
Today we have our good friend RJ de Vera. When I think car industry, I think of RJ. I feel like he's been around as long as I've known it and then some. And it was really cool to get to hear stories about the fact that his mom had a turboed minivan that she used to drag race. What?
Yeah, it was really wonderful to hear how close he is with his mother and how impactful she was to where RJ is today within the car community and the car industry.
Yeah. And he went from selling car parts out of their condo to, wow, he's had so many careers. RJ was at McGuire's for years, and now he's at SEMA, the nonprofit, which, if you guys don't know about SEMA, they are basically the nation's largest trade show when it comes to automotive. And they also help to keep the passion of motorsports alive.
Yeah, it was great to sit down with RJ because, you know someone, but you don't really know them until you get to talk to them on a personal level in a quiet environment. Because usually you run into each other at some big event like SEMA or some, car event, and, it's very superficial talk. So it was really nice to see somebody that I personally, in a way, have almost been intimidated by because, I met RJ because he lent me his NSX, his famous NSX, way before the Fast and Furious days, and I always coined him as the Asian James Dean, and I used a little bit of his swagger even in the Han character because I was like, this guy is super cool. So, but to actually sit down with him, get to know the man behind the myth was really awesome.
Yeah. And he actually had a feature in the Fast franchise as well.
That's right.
Without further ado, RJ de Vera.
RJ.
Hey.
RJ de Vera.
What's going on? Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on.
When people talk about RJ, your mother always comes up.
Yes.
And it's something that I've always admired and envied about you, that you have such a deep connection.
Oh, thanks.
A close
I appreciate
relationship to your mother.
I'm a mama's boy for sure. I love her dearly. I wouldn't be who I am without her. But in the 90s, when my parents got divorced, she decided to come hang out with her kids, me and all my friends that were in the car club, to drive us back and forth from the car show. And then she used to go to Battle of the Imports with us. And then one day she woke me up and she's like, "Hey, can we turbocharge my van?" And I was like, "Are you serious?" She's like, "Yeah, I'm getting bored just hanging out with you guys. I want to go drag racing with you guys." I'm like, "Okay, sure."
In the van.
What kind of van was
it? It was
this?
a Honda Odyssey minivan. But the original
Sorry,
one,
it wasn't
was
a Sienna.
It's still a minivan.
Yeah, it wasn't a Sienna, but it was a minivan. So anytime anyone turbocharges a minivan, I always kind of get some nostalgic feelings like BZ's Odyssey and stuff. But yeah, we painted it yellow for her 50th, I remember.
Dude, I'm sorry. I'm shook. I didn't know your mom had a yellow minivan and used to race people.
It wasn't fast, but she was really good at bracket racing. So I taught her how to power brake and build a boost up.
I want to meet your mom. Let's have her on the podcast.
The coolest mom ever, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was really fun. But yeah, she would beat people because she was pretty good at dialing in and running pretty consistent. And she would always give people a hug. So my friends would come destroyed, and they're like, "Dude, I just lost your mom in her minivan." I'm like, "I'm sorry." They're like, "I will never race my mom. She'll definitely beat me," because her dial-in was on the money, a 10th every time.
Amazing.
But, yeah, she's super cool.
I read that you guys started selling car parts out of the condo.
Yeah, she still lives in that condo.
She still lives there.
Yeah. So she's a great example of, any parent that's had a difficulty but decided to be different for her kids. Because some parents have a rough upbringing and it kind of continues on, and there's some parents that kind of do the flip, right? I really got early into wanting a modified car, so I started buying parts for a car I didn't have pretty early on, and I was saving up for a Civic. And then because my brother wanted to be a DJ, she gave him the wagon, sold his car, and then got me an Integra, which I started modding really fairly quickly, even before I had my license, actually. And then she was like, son, it's a new car. Like, I got you a new car so you don't have to fix anything. And I'm like, well, I'm not really fixing anything. She's like, I don't get it. And I just needed an excuse. So I'm like, well, there's this whole thing going on with people modding like import cars. I'm just gonna sell the parts. And she's like, you're gonna sell what parts? And I'm like, well, springs and roll bars and intakes. And she's like, I don't get it, but if you like doing it, sure. You know, you got to pay for the stuff on your car. I'm not gonna pay for it. So that's how that started. And I learned how to promote that stuff, kind of helping my brother promote and his friends promote the clubs that they were doing. So I just made flyers with car parts on it. And I would put it at the different like fixed up cars at the local college, Santa Monica College. And that's really how I started.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I started selling car covers before that, like right before that.
Car covers?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah, I worked at a little shop in Santa Monica, and they were like, oh, like we're really interested in this like this thing that's happening with like, you know, these, you know, Japanese American cars. There was JDM wasn't even a term then. I'm like, oh, I could help with that. And they're like, okay, we'll hire you. But all I did was sell car covers. I was like, oh, I don't want to do that. I don't want to sell like all these like performance parts. And the guy I worked with, he's like, oh, just get a business license. And I was like, well, how do you do that? He's like, well, you go down to this State Board of Equalization office. And I was like, well, how old do you have to be? And he's like, I don't think you have to be any age.
Wait, that's so intimidating for so many people to do, and it doesn't seem like that's anything that's prevented you in your life. Someone you just went straight after it, because at least as a child growing up, for me, if someone were to tell me, oh, go to get a business license, like I would be a little intimidated of that process.
It's the Asian hustle.
Yeah, I don't.
Not saying I wouldn't do
Immigrant
it,
mentality.
but
Go get it, right?
Yeah, I think there's a couple people that are listening up. I think it's part Asian, but I think it's an immigrant hustle. Like when you're an immigrant, you know. So I immigrated from the Philippines with my parents. It's like, well, that's what is needed to get done. Okay, I'll find out, and all they can say is no, right? What else is going to happen? So yeah, I was really skeptical that I would even get it, because I didn't know if there was this 18-year-old barrier, because I was 16 and a half or 17.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah. And so I would call these shops that I was buying parts from. There are very few that sold parts. And I'd be like, hey, I'm looking to, you know, start selling this stuff. And I remember when I would walk in, because I was 17, with like size 36, like khakis and like the bangs that were dyed. And they were like, are you the guy I spoke to on the phone? I'm like, yep, that's me. And they're like, is it like a real business? I'm like, yep, have my business license. And they're like, where's your shop? I'm like, well, it's in West LA. You know, and I wouldn't tell anyone. It was just my mom's condo. And so it was a lot of fun. It taught me a lot. And that was kind of the time when like import car culture was really like starting to move. Like the first import car show was in 95. I had started this in 94 because I graduated in 95. But the only place you could really go if you had a fixed up car was to these house parties that we talked about before we sat down. Or these like 18 and over like dance parties.
What's this house party?
Yeah,
stuff?
so
I'll let you get into it.
Sure. So a lot of the house parties were kind of varied, right? There were people dancing, there's people getting in trouble, but a couple of us would end up in the garage, and because we had no money, and we're like, okay, well, whose car's next? You know, and really, all we wanted to do was lower it and look, you know, kind of gangster, right? So we got my friends and I got really good at like, you know, popping off suspension, and we didn't even have the spring tension thing.
Really?
So we would just put a box, a dyno exhaust box, and we would stand on it, and we were like, one more, like everyone get out of the way, you know, and it would like pop off, you know, and that's how and then we would cut it or have it burnt somewhere, right? Which was the worst ride. I think someone was talking about like it was fun to be bouncy. Like, no, that wasn't fun. But that's what happened, right? Because there wasn't a lot of stuff that you could buy at the time. So yeah, I ended up befriending a lot of Asian gangs because I lowered a lot of their cars. Wow. But they're also like, oh, that's RJ. He's into that street racing stuff. Like, don't need to mess. You know, you don't need to mess with him. He's cool. You know. But yeah, it was fun. It was a lot of fun. It was kind of that culture at that time until import show off and hot import nights and Battle of the Imports got really big, which led into the movie, of course. And then, it was kind of a game changer at that time. But it was already kind of getting bigger Yeah, because there was just this movement.
For those that you don't know, speaking of the movie, RJ is in Fast and Furious.
Yeah, a little 2 seconds of fame. I still get residuals.
A little more than that.
Yeah, I mean, it was 3 lines in the script. One got cut, where Ja Rule and I were kind of bantering at the line.
So just to give you context of how I know RJ was starving actor. Like I'm like $1.25, starving, have like 20 jobs just to like, be able to eat. And I was like, I have to just like make some type of money. I have to also be around like, production and Stan, I can't remember his last name, but he was part of Yoke magazine, and he was a good friend, right? He was like a older kind of like brother type, and he was like, "Hey man, we got to do this like kind of cool commercial, and you have a camera," which I didn't. Right, I told him I did. I told him I have a Canon, because I could borrow it.
Right.
And he's like, "Do you want to shoot this commercial?" And I was like, "What do you mean? Like shoot it?" He's like, "You want to direct it?" And I was like, "Yeah." I had never directed anything, and he's like, "You know how to do that?" I go, "Yeah, of course I do, Stan."
You're
take
like,
it till
yeah.
you make it, right?
I was
Yeah.
like, "Hell yeah!" And I'm like, "So what is it about?" He's like, "Well, you got to come up with an idea, and then." It's like some car thing. This is way before Fast and Furious or anything, right? So, and then somehow, I think that the actress that was going to be in the commercial, Stan already had picked her, or they were friends, and she was friends with you. So,
makes a lot of
because I was
sense.
like, where do we get a car?
Right.
It's like, well, we need like a dope car. I go, like, what kind of car? It's like, ideally like a NSX or something like that. Like, I'm like, that's crazy. That's insane. Like, who's gonna let us borrow that? We have no money. And then you showed up with your car,
Okay.
right? And
Do you
then,
remember this?
It's starting to ring some bells.
You don't remember, RJ?
No, I do that now that you say it,
And
but
then he shows up, and I tell everybody
Yeah.
this story. I was like, "Yo, man, that's like an Asian James Dean." Dude, it was because I'm
What
not
a
from LA,
compliment,
right? So I didn't grow up in that like culture, right? Like the car culture. In Georgia, we didn't have that. It
And
was
that's
like,
a nice car.
yeah.
That's
Yeah.
a very
For like
nice
a young,
car.
and we're
Yeah.
like in
it
our
was every
20s.
dime that I had, actually. There's a story about that I can get into. but
What color was that car?
It was red. It was candy apple red. Then it was a color shift paint. Then it was silver. Then
Silver. We got it when it
Okay,
was silver.
And
Yeah.
then it was orange. That
Yeah.
was the last 6 colors. Too many.
Yeah.
I would have kept it if I didn't paint it so many times.
But he was the first like cool like Asian car dude I had ever met.
That's so cool.
Like I gotta find this commercial.
I want to
have
see
to,
it.
yeah.
Yeah. But anyway.
That's so cool. That was your directorial debut,
Debut,
whether
yeah.
you realized
Yeah,
it or not.
and we finished it. Like we cut it. It took forever because it was, we cut it on Premiere. So there was it? Yeah, it was Premiere or Avid. It was an old ass computer. That's all I remember. It was before Final Cut.
Yeah.
And we had to like walk away and go have dinner every time we rendered
Yeah,
something.
yeah. I remember
right?
those days.
But yeah, you came and you were like
Sounds
so
very
chill.
me, actually. Because I always wanted, and even me now, probably not as much, but anytime someone had a project like, hey, we're trying to do this, I'm like, let's go. Like, what do you need? Like, you need a car, you need a person. So that's how that Arco thing came up.
That's funny because that's how I know you today. You're still very much like that.
Yeah, I
Of
try to be.
make it like, let's do this,
Let's
make it
do this,
happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially if it's like paving a way or giving someone an opportunity. I just love to get involved. So being part of this Asian American movement at that age, and then like car culture becoming somewhat of our platforms to be kind of seen and recognized, became a real fulfilling thing for me.
Let's back up.
Sure.
How did you get involved?
In Fast.
Yeah. Because you were a consultant on
Yes,
that film.
I was initially a consultant with Craig Lieberman, the other person that was consulting on the film. We were both working at Peterson Publishing. Somehow, somebody at Universal found Craig, gave him the script when it was still Redline. He read it. They were like, hey, we were looking for some consultants. He jumped on. And they were like, hey, do you know any Asian kids that grew up kind of like street racing and stuff? And he's like, funny you ask. Like, yeah, I have this really young, yappy 20-year-old that works for me, and I'm actually part of his car club. we're gonna have a car show this weekend. You should come meet them. And then they were like, hey, what's your story? And I told them my story. They're like, oh, well, do you want to help us? And I literally thought the movie was gonna go straight to DVD. I'm like, are you serious? You're gonna make a film with import cars? Sure, right? And they're like, no, we're serious. I'm like, okay, sure. If Craig's working on it, yeah, sure, I'll help. And so what we first did was go through the script and be like, well, this car progression doesn't feel right. Like, was it Paul's character initially went from like a 3000 GT to an Eclipse, and we're like, well, that progression isn't right. So we started to align cars to characters, and then they wanted to go find some cars. So we started to call friends for these like casting calls for cars. And then started to figure out, like, could we afford it? Because I think that initial movie was like a $35 or $40 million budget. So there were actually a lot of cars that ended up being the character car that weren't initially. Selfishly, I was trying to get Vin's character to drive the NSX, but we couldn't afford 6 of them, let alone the kit that was on my car. Like, they wouldn't give it to us for free. So we ended up getting the RX-7. Because the Veilside guys were totally down. They're like, yeah, you need kits? No problem. I don't even know what it's for. So there's little funny tidbits like that. Even the S2000, that was Rick Yoon's vehicle, which is the villain in the first movie, that ended up being my S2000. We wanted to use a Hammond Z4, but we couldn't afford 4 or 5 Hammond Z4. So it's like, what else do we got? I'm like, oh, I have this thing, S2000, that looks kind of like Batmobile. They're like, that's good. Can you get the kit? Like, yeah, I think I can get that kit for us. Which ended up being Suki's car in the second movie, and now it sits at the Peterson.
Oh, it's the same car?
Same car, yeah.
Who made that kit?
Veilside, which
That's
I know you know.
Kit
Yeah, you know Sacho. So
Yokomaku-san.
Yeah.
Wow, it's the same. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was black in the first movie with the ninja stars, which we made fun of in Super Street and called them snowflakes.
I didn't realize, like, Veilside was there from the beginning.
From the beginning, yeah.
I mean, I don't know if you had an opportunity. Well, hopefully you get to meet him one day, Yokomaku-san, the owner of Veilside. It's like just one of the angelic human beings.
Yeah.
I did see your Z at Tokyo Auto
It was there again this
year.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's one of the OGs from that Japan tuning era, like Smokey Nagata, Inada-san, Drift King. They're all the same circle.
Yeah.
And I had met him because I was working at Super Street, and I was going to Auto Salon to cover it for Super Street. He didn't have a booth at Auto Salon, so I got some friends to rent a van to drive us out to his shop. And then I shot it for a feature. And then the next year I came back, and I'm like, hey, you remember me? I work for this small little magazine in the U.S. And people were already knocking his stuff off in the U.S. And he was like, RJ, like, in Japan, this is shameful. And I'm like, I understand, but people want your stuff and they can't get it. And they're like, I'm going to fly to the U.S. and you're going to help me. And I was like, sure, okay. So I actually helped him start his U.S. when he had the U.S. offices back then, which is how we got all the parts for the movie. Because I was like, hey, there's this movie that's happening. We need some parts. And he's like, what do you need? I'm like, well, we need RX-7 kits and S2000 kits. He's like, do you need wheels? I'm like, well, yes, we need wheels. Send that too. And so that's how we ended up in the movie.
Wow.
Yeah. But he was a mentor for me. Everyone talks about their mentors. So he was definitely one of them.
That's so interesting. I never knew that, RJ.
Yeah, he's super angelic. Like there's so many cars that I built that ended up on the covers of magazines. And they did because he would always send me the first. So he'd like, oh, here's my new, the S2000. Here's my new Millennium Edition S2000 kit. I'm going to send you one. Go build a car. Or here's the MR2 Fortune model kit. I'm going to send you one.
And is this while you were at Super Street?
It was while I was kind of like a roving editor at Super Street. Yeah. And still doing, selling body kits and other parts. And then started the wheel line. I don't know if you know this. I had a wheel line that was named after me for about 7 years, which was a lot of fun.
Really?
So
those are probably collector items now.
It's fine. I didn't keep any. I don't have one single one.
Wait, if anyone's listening who has, what did you call them?
If you have a Roja Motorsport wheel, I would love to have one.
Tag us.
Yeah, tag us, please. Yeah.
Gotta bring those back, man.
Yeah.
It was a good era in my life. I was very blessed, very fortunate. I remember the wheel deal specifically where I had helped a company, American Racing, develop their new import line, which is still around. It's called Motegi Racing. And they were like, hey, RJ, like, have you ever thought of having your own line? And they created a mock-up, and the center cap said RJD wheels. which I just about fell like out of my chair laughing because I was super into like the JDM stuff, like Racing Heart, SSR, and I could never imagine someone like wanting to buy a wheel that had like RJD. And I remember driving home one day and I was like, even if it did suck, it'd just be cool.
Mm-hmm.
And this is probably in the early 2000s, right before the first movie. I go back and I'm like, hey guys, like I'm down. Like you can't call it RJD because that sounds really lame. They're like, it's your line. You make it whatever you want. I'm like, okay, cool. And that started that whole kind of line of wheels for about 7 years.
That's a long time.
Yeah,
RJ.
it had a good run.
Yeah. I like what you just said about, you being kind of like, there was like self-doubt about like, who's going to want these wheels? But let's give it a try, right? It's like these voices in our head, like, I'm very guilty of it. And that's something that, I'm always conscious of and trying to like overcome, going, well, I'd like to try this. I'd like to, write this or direct this, or even my first like, movie I directed, right? The whole time I was all these voices like, who are you to direct? What do you know? You have no talent.
Imposter syndrome.
Yeah, it's gonna bomb. It's gonna flop. You're gonna lose money. It's gonna suck. It's gonna suck. It's gonna suck. And you'll never be able to do this again. And then even after I finished it, I was like constant voices like, it's gonna suck. It's gonna suck. It sucks. It sucks. It sucks. And then it comes out and it's like, it sucks. It sucks. It sucks. And then all of a sudden one day, you like step back and you go, it didn't win an Oscar, it didn't do all that, but it sets you up and you learn so much.
Yeah.
Right? And the most important thing I learned was that even if it didn't win awards and doesn't have the same successes as like the big blockbusters, it made me realize that I have so much gratitude that I could just even do that.
Yeah.
To be in a place to go, hey, you want to go make a movie, you want to direct a movie. It actually happened.
Yeah.
Right? And then the voices kind of calm down and you're like, hey, shut up voices, just go and do. And the lesson that I'm trying to like convey here is that, everything you do, anything that you create on this, into this world is going to be difficult, right? But you got to shut those voices down. You just got to do it, right?
I heard something this morning and I don't know who it came from, so I don't want to misquote, but it was one day or day one. It's your choice.
So simple, huh?
Yeah, I know. But like so much there at the same
There's
time
so
too.
much, yeah, because if you don't start, it never happens. Right?
But I hear that through line in your story a lot, even, getting the business license of just going after it and getting it. It doesn't seem, or do you have many thoughts that are similar to what Sung's saying of imposter syndrome or maybe doubt? Do you ever doubt yourself?
I definitely have the voices. I think a lot of people do, right? Deep down, that doubt and whether, am I capable of doing this? What gives me the right to try this? Will it resonate with anyone? I think that's a lot of people deal with that, right? I'd like to say I probably bury it pretty good. Where like, oh well, what's the worst that can happen? And I think I was really blessed and fortunate that at a fairly young age, I was able to do that, and things were somewhat successful, right? The movie did well, Super Sheet did well. So I worked on projects. I worked on Forza Motorsports, that did well. And so I was really like, oh, to your point, like you look back, you're like, that did pretty good, And so you gain more confidence. And it's kind of, I'm sure your first YouTube video to the one you just posted.
If you go back and watch.
Huge growth, right?
Yeah.
And
growth
evolution.
is a very nice way to put it.
Yeah, because I mean, it is day one, you
Yeah.
know, and so I've been really lucky, and I think the three of us, to be able to do things where then you can look back in hindsight. And so the second time you do it, it's a lot easier, and the third time, it becomes like, oh, I kind of know this cycle, and so you do have a lot more confidence. And then you also fail, right? I was, I after the wheel line, I tried to do a whole performance car line right around the '01 bubble bursts. And I had investment, and then I lost it. I was trying to build a couple pro drag cars, went crazy in a debt on my mom's home equity. and then had to shut everything down, and the dream came collapsing down, and it was probably some of the toughest time in my life. And it took me 7 or 8 years to kind of pay back this loan. Luckily, it was a home loan. So, but this fear that I was going to lose like our small little condo, you know, chasing this dream, and having this gratitude to my mom for even allowing me to like do that. Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
But that was an experience, and you grow from it, and then you learn like, well, failure is just a part of it, you know, and it's just about getting up and getting back on the bike. Right. So, and I think that's where that imposter syndrome can really hold you down if you hold on too much to the things that didn't go well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, versus like, well, that didn't go well. What did I learn? Okay, that hurts. I'm going to let it hurt, and then I'm going to move on.
And just because it didn't go well last time doesn't mean it's not going to go well again.
So I think that's, if I could impart anything on anyone, you know, I would agree with you. Just day one, just go for it, you know, and no matter what happens, it's not the end of the world. Life goes on. You know? So, yeah.
Wow. You know, thanks for sharing that. I mean, I think a lot of people look at you. He's a dude that everything goes right, and then to just share that, you had to take like a loan out from your mom's condo where it all started,
where it all
and
started.
it could all end.
And I almost lost it all, you know.
That is pretty amazing. Obviously, I mean, all that wealth of knowledge is, you know, valuable to the industry, the car industry today, because now you're at SEMA.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah. So it's come around full circle. You know, like my first two main events that I went to outside of the import car shows were Auto Salon and SEMA back in '96.
Tokyo Auto Salon.
So Tokyo Auto Salon for those listening, which is, there's a couple events that I think if you're a car enthusiast, you have to go to. Tokyo Auto Salon is one of them. Festival of Speed is another. SEMA show is another. And Monterey Car Week. Those to me, those four, like, if you love cars, like, you gotta go to those four. But SEMA, I haven't missed one since '96, except for the one that we didn't have. So this one will be 27 years. So when I came to work for the organization, it kind of felt like a homecoming. The only thing that I had not done going to the SEMA show was be part of the team that put it together. I had been, you know, a builder, photographer, small company,
host,
bigger company, host, for like so many things around the show, that it just felt like natural that I would be part of the team that helped, you know, kind of puts it together and helps evolve it. And just the organization, right? Because many people think about SEMA and they just think about the show.
Right.
But the organization does so much more for just the aftermarket companies and the people that are involved and the industry. So
For the listeners that don't know what SEMA is, like, how would you describe it for layman terms?
Well, it's a membership-based organization or association, but it really looks out for, you know, of course, the membership base and helping them bring products to market. But it also really looks out for the industry and advocating for the industry, right? We're doing a lot of work on the government front, you know, to really advocate for, as an example, a technology-neutral future. There's a lot of proposals that by 2035, everything that's sold new is going to be EV. And we feel, and personally, for myself too, that it should be technology neutral. People should be allowed the choice to choose whether it's a synthetic fuel or hydrogen or biofuel or EV or hybrid. That the customer should have the choice, right? It shouldn't be mandated. So let like innovation kind of, you know, it's the American story. You know, let innovation like win over. So we're doing things like that. And we do a lot of product development testing and EPA and CARB compliance for a lot of companies.
You're making it too
complicated.
Yeah, it's a nonprofit organization,
yes,
to help and support aftermarket companies,
yes,
right?
and the industry,
yes, the automobile.
Sorry, son, I got too deep in it real quick. I just love it. I just love what we stand for. I do love working here, and it's really, really interesting to see like car culture like move beyond just like national borders, right? And I think Fast kind of did that too, you know, where like it created this phenomenon.
Sure.
Yeah.
And just to be part of that for me was very fulfilling, really, really fulfilling. And so that's all I want to do now is do things like that. So,
do you think because of social media, car culture is going strong? Because, you know, with EV coming in, there was always this argument, this notion about car culture dying. But it seems like You know, anytime I look at
It's-
like Instagram or TikTok,
Yeah.
it's all like, maybe it's my
Your feed.
my
Yeah,
feed.
your feed, yeah.
It's all I see, right?
I think I was on the brink of disappearing, to be quite frank. After the recession, it felt like my nephews, as an example, for me being who I am and my nephews not caring about cars is a little bit crazy to me. But it's just not their deal, you know?
How old are they?
They're 25 and 23. Super into sports, super into gaming, but
They
that's
don't
their
care-
deal.
They don't care about cars at all.
Not at all. But it felt like during after the 09 recession, there was this dip. And then right around like 2013 or 14, I started to see young people again at car meets. And they would rattle off like car names and horsepower, like the people that grew up in our generation that played Gran Turismo, actually, oddly enough, and found out about cars. And come to find out, because of social media, because of mobile games like CSR Racing and things of that nature, it was kind of coming back in a different way, though, you know? Do I think things will change? Absolutely. If things become really like all new cars are EV, that's going to change things, you know? But I think the love to personalize thing isn't.
You know,
And I think that's where the difference is. Like maybe some of the performance stuff changes, but this idea that you're always going to want something that's personal and yours, I think isn't going to go away. So that's what gives me hope.
Yeah.
And then, of course, what everybody's doing, you know, the stuff that Emelia's doing, Dustin, TJ, you name it, right? All these people that are young and really diving into it and showing that next generation. It's really cool to see, and I think it is helping at the end of the day. Like, I don't think we'd have as much interest from the younger generation if people like Emelia weren't making her content and breaking the barriers that she's breaking.
absolutely.
Right? So
Absolutely. I was watching this YouTube video of this car meet in Texas, right? And this guy asking, you know, car owners like, hey, you know, what do you think about this car? And he show a picture of like somebody's NSX and, you know, give it a rating 1 to 10. And you go, oh, that's a 9, that's a 10. And there was, you know, of the 10 people I saw, there was, I think, one Asian dude. Everybody was like Texan, like, you know, good old boy, like Americans. But everyone was driving. I think I saw one Hellcat. Everybody was driving JDM.
yeah.
And it made me realize something. It's like through the car culture, this thing of like inclusion, diversity, right? Understanding other cultures, like for us to be accepted, people that look like you and I, the cars are taking care of that for us because
In a way,
these
yeah.
Japanese cars are so beloved. It's not a thing anymore. There used to be this term called rice rocket. Even 5 years ago, man, there was like these Maverick guys from Good Old Boys, and you know, they kept calling my Maverick like a rice rocket, and I was like, what is that term, rice rocket? Right? That thing is gone now. They're just like, hey man, that's a dope ass car, right? And it's pretty beautiful to see that you know, the car culture, JDM culture becoming so like global actually helps like people get along better, you know, and it fights racism. It was this like fascinating like you know, like realization I had. It's
I've
like
never thought of it that
10
way.
years ago, these good old boys would be in like, you know, American Iron, and they'd look at a Integra Type R as like a rice rocket.
Yeah, for
you know,
sure.
they're like, why would I drive that? Or they'd look at that Corolla as like, why would I drive that little Corolla? But now that is like
Pretty cool, right?
everyone's
Yeah.
bucket list,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, it's changed for sure. I think for Bring a Trailer, like the fastest growing segment is 80s and 90s JDM cars. Like, there's this bond that people start to have when you're like, oh, you're a car enthusiast? Like, we're the same people. You know, and it happens in different cultures, right? Or other things like food or sneaker culture or whatever. But car culture is one of them. You travel around the world, and it could be a completely different. Like, I've never seen this car. Like, I used to go to France. I'm like, what is that? Peugeot? Like, but it's tuned in the same way. It's got paint job and stereo and wheels, and you're like, you're my people.
I call that my found family because I always say wherever I travel, I know I have a family there, and you don't even need to speak the same language. Like when I was at Tokyo Auto Salon, I was using the translator app to just communicate about the modifications that had been done to the certain cars. And I at one point I took a step back and screenshot it because I was like, this is pretty cool.
Yeah.
We don't speak the same language, but at the same time we do, and we're talking it, and that's cars.
I am curious, like, what are you guys looking to do next, car-wise? Like, what's your? Well, you got
Project base?
Yeah, you got your 34.
Yeah. That's probably going to be my next project.
Okay.
I also have this replica Superbird
Okay.
that
Yeah,
I came
saw
across
that.
that I'm kind of going through the planning stages of right now.
Okay.
And yeah, a few cars on my horizon,
And
but my biggest focus right now is getting the
Good.
GTR on a container
here.
and back out here to the States. What about you?
I have it's actually a 85 Grand National roller found in the desert.
Oh,
I have
cool.
I have a stock Grand
Oh,
National,
yeah.
which you have a Grand National
Yeah,
too.
yeah, yeah.
I love
sold
this.
it.
I love.
Oh wow, it's
I
sold.
sold
you sold it?
Yeah.
Well, so I just love the G bodies.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then Nissan,
Mm-hmm.
they're supporting us, and they send over enough car for me to take all the pieces out.
I love how he names all his
I
cars.
was
So,
just
yeah.
thinking, you are so good at
Him and
naming.
Daniel Wu, like best names for cars.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm doing
Yeah.
it with Daniel
Oh, okay.
because we have student
No
driver
wonder it's
together.
such a great
Yeah.
name.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
then it's actually just sitting in the garage now. So we just got to get to it. It's been a bit busy last year. I'd love to
That would be
send it to Tokyo Auto Salon and just leave it there because Japanese love American cars.
Yes. Yeah.
Right,
There's
and then
there's a
sending
contingent.
a real Grand National, and the heart is Japanese car,
Yeah.
which is like so awesome, right? So Kinkuro
That's sweet.
with like Watanabes. Imagine
Oh,
like the
yeah,
vision is like
Watanabes.
big fat Watanabes, right, with the Rocket Bunny kit on it, right? And it's all these little, like the door handles are from the GTR.
Oh, okay.
Right,
So you're gonna
so-
fuse it a little bit
Yeah.
together.
Yeah, so it's like if a Grand National
Mm-hmm.
and a GTR had a baby, the King Kudo would come out. So it's a biracial car.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm excited for this project.
Yeah, that sounds
Yeah.
really rad.
Yeah. Is yours going to be the S2K?
Yeah, it's almost done actually for what I wanted it to
Done.
be.
What were you doing to it? You just got this car a couple months ago?
No, it's been 2 years almost.
Okay.
Because I kind of the thought was if I was gonna make an S2000, if Fast and Furious was just coming out now, how would I build it? And so that's what this car is. It's kind of a little bit of a tribute build.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So I've been driving it around a lot. It got done about 4 months ago. I just haven't taken it to track, which will be the next thing. So
Since I have you here, RJ, this is a good person to talk to.
Not the underwear thing.
No.
Okay.
Well, that's
is that like an off podcast thing?
old topic. Underwear. That's hilarious. We should ask her. So since you were part of the first Fast,
Yes.
and now we're at Fast
11,
89,
yeah,
right?
yeah. 9,000.
Yeah. Where do you think the Fast franchise can go or should go? Or should it even go any longer? Because what's interesting, what you said was when you guys were working on the first one, you thought it was going to be a straight to DVD or
yeah.
VHS movie, right?
Yeah.
Because it was like designed to be like a B movie,
Yeah.
right?
Summer popcorn.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of the
Soul
story
kind-
of the
yeah,
franchise,
franchise,
right?
yeah.
It's like the underdog movie that keeps going and going.
Right.
I mean, now that we're literally in space,
Yeah.
it seems
You're all Avengers at this point.
So how do we make it
anymore.
better? If you were
I
to,
don't know if there was.
so-
I don't know if it's better. I mean, I do feel like
what does it need to put some gas in the tank? If
I
you
mean,
will?
I see what you did there.
Yeah, pun intended. Right? I the current thing as it is, I think it is things have a beginning and an end, right? So it feels like it should. When you've got cars in a Fiero in space, which is pretty hilarious actually, and cars getting picked up by jets, it's like okay, like it feels like it's run its course as that, and it almost feels like a prequel could be an avenue, where there's a prequel, but it's a completely different story. And it's back to cars, at least as a car fan. Like, I still watch the franchise knowing, like, it's going to be a spy movie, at the end of the day, right? And with a lot of explosions and cars that flip over and keep driving, like, 50 million times, which was funny because we used to make fun of the first one, like, oh, there were, like, 12,000 shifts.
Granny shifting, not double clutching.
And all the words, right?
Yeah.
That they had us actually, like, side tangent. Craig and I created a bunch of words on a sheet, and they just started putting stuff in. Spoon motor with like these T66 turbos, like those don't go together. No one's gonna know. No one's gonna know. But it just feels like it's just so over the top now. Like, how do you bring it back? Like, kind of like Bond. Bond got super over the top when I forget who the action director was, where like people were getting shot at and they weren't like ever getting hit, and then you went to the current version of Bond, which was way more raw, right, and physical, and I feel like the franchise could do that. So that's just party of one if it was going to go anywhere, and maybe it needs to sunset and something else come up. The Gran Turismo movie was a great movie, you know, and that's a different. It approached car culture in a different way. I mean, yeah, it's gaming culture and more racing culture, right? But Gran Turismo was such a big part of why car culture became what it was, because like no one knew what the hell a Spoon Civic was until they played Gran Turismo or a GTR. For a lot of young people, that's how they got introduced, you know. So that's my thoughts on it. I'd love to see it be something different.
Yeah, I mean, when I think about Emelia and the TJs and the Dustins, right? There's such a like lack of representation in movies today for this like demographic, right? I mean, Fast is kind of our generation, right? And it's interesting because when we did Tokyo Drift, I mean, after it came out, people just kind of pooped on the movie. They're like, "What is this drifting nonsense? This is not Fast." And now, the kids today are like, "Hey, that's the movie I connect with," right?
Yeah, that's what started it for a lot of people.
It's interesting, right? It's like,
and not like Fast 1, because there were
Tokyo Drift was the first one for me,
right.
and then I went back and watched the others.
I think there's this opportunity to your point, to have the next generation be a part of something that becomes the next Fast. I mean, car culture I don't think is ever going to die. I think the love for cars and going fast and breaking barriers and all the things that it stands for is part of the human spirit. So how do you capture that in a new way?
Yeah. I think there is a hunger for car-centric like entertainment,
Yeah, there's still a big interest in it.
How, I mean, this is a good question then to gauge that. Is like, is SEMA growing or dying? Or not dying, but is it?
So the pandemic kind of changed things,
okay,
for sure. So we're growing from what the pandemic was. So I think like last year we had like 140,000 people. Year before we had 130. Year before we had 100. Year before we didn't have it. So we're getting close to some of the pre-pandemic numbers.
What were those numbers?
Yeah, what were those numbers?
I think the biggest was like 170.
I would love to see SEMA doing. I know it's Vegas, so there's the parties and all that afterwards. But I'd love to see a car show in one of the garages one night. And I'm sure you guys have talked about doing that. But yeah,
that's a good idea.
Noted. Thank you.
Yeah,
thanks RJ. This was a great conversation.